Hello everyone, it's Heather. Thank you for taking the time to watch this video today. Less than 10% of the people who watch my videos are subscribed to my channel. If you're not subscribed, would you please take a second and do that? It's free, it doesn't cost you anything, and it really helps out my channel. And if you are already subscribed, be sure to give me a thumbs up on this video to show your support. In today's video, I'm going to share with you what we spent on our most recent trip. Before I get into what we spent on our most recent trip in June 2021, I want to update you on a couple of things that are probably lingering questions in some of my long-term viewers' minds. Okay, the first one, way back in late December or maybe the very beginning of January, I quite emotionally shared with everyone that I had gotten a letter from unemployment that they were expecting me to pay back. It was actually over $8,000 in unemployment benefits that I had received because I was ineligible for those benefits. This was obviously very upsetting because that was a lot of money for me and I had absolutely no idea how I was going to be able to pay that back. I received unemployment for the months of April through October of 2020. However, I didn't actually receive any money until almost all the way through June. That's how backed up unemployment was at the time because of all the new filings because of the pandemic. According to my account online, the federal government has changed it a couple of times and there actually is more money available to me. But I'm afraid to do anything with it now because I don't really know if I'm eligible or not, and I don't want to go through the whole stress of what happened again. Okay, so I have to update you on that. I appealed that determination. My argument was, which proved to be correct, was that unemployment made the mistake. They instructed me to file weekly claims through the summer. I was working as a substitute teacher and normally we're not entitled to claims during the summer. They specifically instructed me to file claims through the summer after I told them I have reasonable assurance from the school district to have work in the fall. Am I still supposed to file claims through the summer? And they told me yes. And so I did, and that was the money that they were saying I wasn't supposed to receive and that I had to pay all back. The judge agreed with my argument and said that it was the Department of Unemployment's mistake and therefore I do not have to pay any of the money back. So she affirmed the determination that I was not eligible for the money during those weeks, but she waived the requirement for me to have to pay the money back. So that was a huge relief to me. It's still kind of a mess on unemployment's website, but they're like still working through it or something, but they still haven't even processed the last of the weeks I filed in like December of 2020 and January of 2021 when schools were closed again because of high cases in our area. So unemployment's a mess. If any of you are dealing with unemployment nightmares, I totally feel for you. Also, some of you are probably wondering, since I've been pretty open about the fact that I don't have a job, and I haven't been able to work since I injured my ankles at the beginning of December 2020. How were we able to take our trip in June of 2021? And how are we able to take the two trips we have coming up? We have another trip coming up very soon. So be sure you're subscribed so you don't miss any of our upcoming vlogs. And then we have a big trip to Walt Disney World booked for January, which is going to be Megan's celebratory trip for her graduating early from high school. She'll be graduating from high school in January. So how was I able to afford those? Okay, basically the long story short is we do have multiple strange sources of income that I don't really want to get into that come from different places. We've also gotten assistance from the government like most Americans have, which has been extremely helpful. I don't know what we would have done without it. Just today, as I'm filming this video, I got my first extra child tax credit payment, which is money that I'm going to be using for our next trip coming up, mainly to pay for food. I also have completely exhausted my savings. I did have a small amount of retirement savings with the Wisconsin Teacher Employment Fund from my years teaching. It was not enough money to use as retirement payments down the road. Like when I retire, if I still was teaching, we're talking less than $10,000. So it was not enough to have me have regular retirement payments. The only option I had was to take a lump sum payment. And so I chose to do that at this time, even though I took kind of a hit, like for early withdrawal and tax purposes. I chose to do that at this time because it was very important to me to be able to take these trips with my kids now when they're with me. And also, I considered it an investment in my channel because I'm very much trying to grow my channel and get to the point where we can be earning an income from the ad revenue from my YouTube channel. All right, let's talk about what we spent on our most recent trip. For the purposes of this video, I'm rounding, okay? I'm not giving you the exact nitpicky little figures, but I'm giving you kind of the overall general. I mean, these are exact figures, but I'm not rounding to like the penny. First thing is airfare. And when I talk about airfare and I talk about how much I paid for the car rental, I want you to keep something in mind that's very important right now in summer of 2021. Car rental may cost more than your airfare. If it's just you, one or two people, it's definitely going to cost more than your plane tickets. So keep that in mind. And also, if you're going to need a car rental on an upcoming trip, book the car rental first. Book the car rental before you book your plane tickets. I'm not kidding. It's really bad. You must book your car rental as early as possible. You might also want to consider booking a backup rental reservation. Don't pay any money ahead of time, but have more than one reservation so that you have a backup in case when you get to your destination, they don't have a car for you. If you haven't read about the car rental apocalypse, the basic gist is that during the pandemic, most car rental companies sold off a very great number of cars from their fleets, and they have not restocked those cars yet. You might also be aware that we're having a challenge in our economy in a shortage of cars overall. The cost of used cars for sale right now is also exceptionally high. And the reason for this is because of a global shortage of chips, computer chips that are used in automobiles and other things. There's just not enough of them, and so they're not able to manufacture as many cars as they normally would, and there is a shortage of cars, both cars for sale and cars for rent. So be aware that car rental prices are very, very high. I got a fairly decent price for this past trip in June, but our upcoming trip, it's painful to me how much I'm spending. I'm spending over $1,000 for a car rental for 1 week, and that's just insane. That's so expensive for car rentals. If you're not familiar with what it normally costs to rent a car, normally rental car costs would be like $25 to $50 a day. So for a week, it would be at most like $350 maybe. And so I'm spending basically 3 times that. That's how much car rentals are right now. So be prepared for that. For some people, this may make or break your trip. You may not be able to do the trip you planned because you can't afford the car rental on top of everything else. So keep that in mind. Car rental is a real problem right now. Okay, so for this trip, I am not exactly sure, actually. I'd have to look back on what we spent on our plane tickets, but I'm just going to tell you that for any domestic flight I take, and this has been this way for quite a number of years, we fly out of the Minneapolis-St. Paul International Airport, which is a very big, very nice airport if you've never been there. It's one of the nicest airports in the United States, I think. I will pay anywhere from $250 to $350 for plane tickets for each of us, for any domestic destination. I really won't go over $350. If it's more than $350, I'm going to keep looking until that price drops or I can find something better. But I should also add, I pretty much always fly on Delta. We love Delta. I think Delta is a high quality air travel product. I think their customer service is very good. I think they do a wonderful job. I think they were the best airline during the pandemic for domestic airlines in the United States. They've done a great job with cleaning. The onboard flight staff has been terrific. We're always very pleased with Delta. And I used to fly other low-cost airlines in the past. Like I used to fly Sun Country and Frontier and some of those. But now these days I pretty much just prefer to stick with Delta, and I always book my flights direct with Delta. I will shop around for flights on other travel sites like Kayak and Expedia and Google Flights and things like that ahead of time to get an idea of price for a while before I actually book. But when I actually book, I book direct with Delta. One of Delta's main hubs is Minneapolis because Delta bought out Northwest Airlines, which was based in Minneapolis. And so when they merged, they took on Minneapolis as one of their main hubs. If I get our tickets, like for the three of us, for less than $300, I'm happy. I'm always happy if it's less than $300. I really don't like to spend more than $1,000 on tickets for the three of us. And I'm sure I didn't spend that on this one. It was somewhere between $250 and $300 each. So I'm just going to say on the high end that I spent $900 on airfare. Okay, another thing that I realized I forgot when I initially wrote this down was gas for the cars. Okay, gas for my car to get up to the airport is not really anything because that's gas I would have had in my car anyway. I can get from my house to the Minneapolis airport and back, and I haven't even used a half a tank of gas. So that's gas I would have had in my car anyway, and I don't really consider that an extra travel expense. I did have to buy gas several times for the rental car. I'm quite cautious. I don't like to get below like between a quarter and a half a tank of gas when I'm traveling, just because I'm a woman traveling alone with my kids. I don't want to run out of gas somewhere. Watch this video for one time that happened to us. When it gets, below half a tank and starts to get toward a quarter of a tank, I stop and fill up the car. That car that we got, that rental car we got on this trip, it was a brand new, I think, 2021 Toyota Corolla. It had about 1,000 miles on it when they gave it to me. And it was an excellent car and obviously got very high gas mileage. The little screen in the car actually even told me it was getting like 50, 60 miles to the gallon. That thing was amazing. I want one. I mean, I probably filled up the tank. What do you think, Ben? 5 times maybe? I think it was probably like 4 or 5 times that I got gas, and I definitely didn't spend $100. I mean, there were a couple times where I filled up the tank and it was only like $18. I don't even think I ever figured out how big the tank was because it was so cheap to fill it up. So gas was pretty minuscule with that car. Okay, I paid $634 for the rental car. Given the current circumstances, I thought that was a pretty good price and I was very happy with that. I did book this rental car pretty well in advance, like, I don't know, 3 months in advance or something. So I got what I consider a pretty decent price for the rental car from Enterprise. Enterprise is my preferred car rental vendor, and that's based on price and customer satisfaction ratings. I was very happy with my experience with Enterprise, and I'm going to be renting a car from Enterprise again for our next trip. There's 2 reasons that it's going to be so much more expensive on our next trip. One is because I was booking it with less advanced notice, and the other one is because I'm changing to a compact SUV on our next trip, and the reason for that I'm going to be talking about in an upcoming video, so stay tuned for that. So when I picked up the car, I think I talked about that in this video, I just went to a kiosk because it was late at night. It was like midnight when I picked up the car. They did put a hold on my credit card for about, I want to say it was like $750 for, extra charges, anything. I didn't pay for anything extra. I didn't get extra insurance. They try to upsell you all these different things. Do you want a toll pass thing? Do you want a child car seat? Do you want a charging cable? Do you want, you can get all these extra things. And I declined everything. Between the fact that I have the credit card I was using has rental car coverage, I have excellent car insurance on my car at home, which will often cover your rental car, and I have AAA. So I was like triple covered for anything that would happen. I was still super paranoid driving in the traffic out there, but I didn't need to buy the extra insurance from the car rental company. But they put a hold on my card for about $750 anyway. But then as soon as I returned the car, that dropped off and they charged me exactly what they quoted me, which was basically $634. On this trip, our biggest expense was hotels. It would not have been our biggest expense except for that one hotel that we stayed at in Corolla, North Carolina, on the beach in the Outer Banks. That video is coming up. I am putting this video up before the rest of the vlogs from the trip, so be sure you stay tuned because there's still a lot more vlogs coming from the rest of our trip. That one hotel was $400 a night, and we stayed there for 2 nights, and it also had pretty high taxes. That was very expensive. Half of our hotel expense for this 7-night trip was those 2 nights we stayed at the Hampton Inn and Suites in Corolla, North Carolina. So I wasn't real happy about that. The next highest one, I think, was $181 a night, which was our hotel in Washington, D.C., and everything else was less expensive than that. In total, we spent basically $1,800 on hotels, but half of that was just for those 2 nights in the Outer Banks. Okay, our second biggest expense for the trip was food. It was actually still even more than the plane tickets. We spent basically $976 on food. This was just a little bit over what I budgeted. I had budgeted $100 a day for food, and that breaks down to about $122 a day. So I wasn't real far off, and I will chalk up that difference to a couple of things. We did have a couple of more expensive sit-down meals, and we went to Busch Gardens Williamsburg, which is theme park food pricing, so that probably bumped it up a little bit. Okay, then our third biggest expense was the airfare. Fourth biggest expense was the rental car. The next biggest expense was admission to various attractions, and this included everything from our tickets to the Spy Museum in Washington, D.C., our nighttime tour of the monuments in Washington, D.C., which I've already put the videos up. Admission to, we went to the Wright Brothers Memorial in the Outer Banks. We went to Busch Gardens Williamsburg. We went to Colonial Williamsburg. We went to the National Aquarium in Baltimore. Those vlogs are all coming, so be sure you stay tuned and are subscribed so you don't miss any of those. But in total, all that I paid for admission to various attractions came to $542 for the 3 of us. And I would say that all of those things, with the exception of maybe the Spy Museum being a little bit disappointing because it was so crowded, I feel were worth the money we spent. The things we spent money to do were probably some of our favorite things that we did on the trip. The only thing I would say that was free that we enjoyed was going to the beach and visiting the lighthouses. Okay, we spent basically $300 on souvenirs. However, I will say that all of our souvenirs were clothing. We bought shirts. Oh, Ben bought a journal. And Megan bought, Busch Gardens, she bought that little glass figurine thing. And I should say Megan bought some stuff for herself that I'm not including in this, but I spent $300 on shirts for me, Ben, and Megan. I hesitate to even put that in the travel category because even though we bought it while we were traveling, that's clothes that we're going to wear all the time, and that really should kind of go in the clothing budget. Okay, and then the 2 last remaining expenses for this trip are 2 that people often forget about. And I talked about this in a previous video in my travel planning and budgeting playlist. The first one was parking. The most expensive part of this, $145 of it, was parking at the airport. I did park my car at the Minneapolis airport, and it cost $145 for me to park it for the 8 days the car was there. We did not have any parking fees with any of our hotels, except for we did park in the parking ramp at L'Enfant Plaza, which is attached to the Hilton in Washington, D.C., and we paid $40-something for that, I think. And then we also paid $6 for a parking ramp in Virginia Beach when we stopped in Virginia Beach that one day, which is coming up. And I think that's it. In total, we spent $230 on parking. So parking is something that people really don't think about. They forget about the cost of parking when they travel. And that can be, like I said, parking at the airport, parking at hotels. Some hotels, depending on the location of the hotel, especially if they're in a big city, are going to have a parking fee. And then parking at parking ramps at various places. Oh, I know one other place. Busch Gardens, I had to pay for parking. However, that was not in this category for the purposes of this. That went along with my tickets because I paid for my parking when I bought my tickets. So keep that in mind that there's various places you're going to have to pay for parking, and you definitely want to look into that when you're budgeting for a trip because that's a category that people often forget. And I mean, $230 isn't, a small amount of money. That could be a big deal if you don't have it. And then the last category, which people also often forget about, was I spent $180 on checked bag fees. It's $30 per suitcase each way. So that's $60 for each of us to check our bags. So that comes to $180 for the three of us. So I was prepared for that. I had budgeted that in. I knew I was going to have checked bag fees. There's only a few times when you're not going to have checked bag fees on domestic travel if you're checking a bag. Now, for these longer trips like this, we're pretty much always going to be checking a bag. I want to take those bigger suitcases. I want us to have plenty of room so that we're not cramming stuff in there and trying to fit tons of stuff into a smaller suitcase. And I also know we're going to be buying things like we did. We bought some clothes, and I'm going to want to have the extra space to bring things back. And there's also something about dirty clothes. You tend to need more room in your suitcase when you're coming back than when you're going. You just don't pack as neatly, if you will, when you're coming back. You just kind of shove it in there. Yeah, exactly. So if it's going to be a long trip like that, we're pretty much always going to check a bag. I think the last time we did not check a bag flying domestically was when we went to Disneyland, and we took our smaller suitcases. It was summer and we were only going to be there for 5 days. And I think we did fine with the smaller suitcases. The funny thing about that story is, even though we were trying to avoid checking a bag, on our flight home from California, the flight was full and they didn't have enough overhead bin space. And so they ended up checking our little suitcases anyway, but we didn't have to pay for it because that was on the airline. That can happen to you. On both of our flights on this past trip, both flights were full, and they were calling and asking people, somebody's going to have to let us check their bag because we don't have enough overhead bin space. That's another thing why I do like to check a bag, is so I don't find myself in that situation. You know, if you're going with the assumption that you're going to save money and time by not checking a bag, but then the airline runs out of overhead bin space and you end up having to check it anyway, and then you still have to go to the baggage carousel to pick up your bag, well, then that didn't work for you, did it? And I kind of said to the kids, it seems to have become such an issue with having enough overhead bin space because so many people seem to be trying to avoid checking a bag. I feel like checking your bag is the new version of not checking a bag. Like, it's more hip now to go ahead and just check your suitcase already, so you're not being that annoying person that's trying to like cram something in the overhead bin when they're already full and being all stubborn about it. But you're going to need to be prepared for those checked bag fees. And so for us, that was $180, not a small amount of money, but something I was prepared for and that you'd need to be prepared for too. So there's a couple of airlines that still have free checked baggage. You can also get free checked bags if you have a high enough level on your loyalty program with the airline, or if you have certain high point type credit cards. Sometimes you'll get a free checked bag with that benefit. I should also add, for those of you who have not had experience traveling internationally, they do not charge you, at least for your first suitcase, when you travel internationally, because they know you're going to another country. You have to take a suitcase. So they're not going to charge you for your first suitcase when you fly. You know, when I fly to London, I get to check a suitcase. It doesn't cost me any extra. But if you're traveling, you know, with your family to Disney World for 10 days or whatever, and you're all going to be checking a suitcase, make sure you check with your airline, and it might be different with each airline. Currently, right now with Delta, it's $30 a suitcase each way. So be sure you're prepared for that when you plan your budget for your trip. Okay, so all in total, and this is again a round estimate, we spent $5,662 on our June 2021 trip. This is, in my opinion, a little bit higher than what I would like to be spending for a week-long, basically road trip. And that I will chalk up to things are expensive in the summer of 2021. Travel is a little higher right now than it has been in the past, and hopefully will be again in the future. Overall, though, this is kind of what you should expect to spend. So this is 3 people, 8 days, 7 nights, including a flight and a rental car, and 7 nights of hotel, 8 days of eating, several attractions. You know, this is how much it costs right now. So I'm hoping that that will help you if you are a family or even a couple, to kind of give you an idea of what travel costs right now and how much you should expect to spend for a family trip like this. Thank you again for watching this video. I hope that you enjoyed it. If you did, be sure to give me a thumbs up down below to show your support. And again, please be sure that you subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. I have lots more terrific vlogs coming from the rest of our trip that we took in June of 2021. Those are coming up soon, so stay tuned. Have a great day, everyone, and safe travels.